Well, this has been a grueling stretch for the Milwaukee Brewers, and I think that we're starting to see it wear on everybody over the last few days. The Brewers, if you need a refresher on the current stretch of their schedule, and this was something that a lot of people circled when the schedule came out last year, they are in the midst of 17 games in 17 days, a stretch that includes 2 West Coast trips, and they're currently midway through that second West Coast trip, and it's going to conclude with a 4-game series against the Dodgers. If you're listening to this on Friday morning, game 1 was already played. We're recording before that. It is the Brewer Fanatic podcast, and this week is going to probably feel like a mix of diagnosing problems while also trying to stoke flames or just get flames to subside a little bit during this stretch of baseball. The Brewers are coming off a week in which they took 2 out of 3 from the Twins, then got swept by the San Diego Padres for 3 games in San Diego. Realistically, they did not play well for basically any of those games, so they did squeak away with more wins than they probably deserved during that stretch, but kind of goes back to our larger point of things seem to be wearing on them a little bit right now, and maybe a couple decisions that they've made along the way that have maybe not helped, even if they were supposed to help. So we'll break it all down as we go into it. Before we do that, though, we should walk through some injury updates. Spencer, I'm not even going to ask how you're doing this week. I'm not even going to acknowledge that you were gone from the pod for a whole week. We're just going to dive right into the content. How do you feel about that?
That's fine. We should thank Owen again for filling in, though.
Yeah, actually, yes. That's a very good point. Owen did a great job last week. We might see him again. I told him at the ballpark that he's now up to the go-to fill-in basically the next time one of us can't do this. So
yeah, he's got leverage innings now.
Leverage innings. He's a leverage guy in the BF Pod bullpen. Speaking of the bullpen, Jojo Romero, whom the Brewers acquired at the trade deadline along with Dustin May from the St. Louis Cardinals, he threw his second bullpen session on August 10th, so a few days ago in Arizona. No incidents there. A few more bullpens and then some live BP. The hope is that he'll start a rehab assignment not next week, but in a few days here, August 17th. He's expected to return then toward the end of the month. Cooper Pratt, this is a bigger one. He felt some hamstring pain, discomfort, whatever you want to call it, during an August 8th game against the Twins. He said that he felt good enough to play the following day. He did receive an MRI, though, and that revealed that he has a hamstring strain in that right hamstring. So right now, the timeline on him is late August. There's not really a whole lot of details that have come out since then. Hamstrings can obviously be a little bit tricky, but it's kind of led to some interesting permutations on the Brewers infield, and we'll maybe address that as we keep going. It did not help that Jet Williams, as this was all going down, exited after one at-bat on the same day in his first game back with AAA Nashville since July 7th. It's the hand, it's the wrist thing again. He's being sent to Arizona. He's going to visit a specialist. But Spencer, the second time that he was injured when he probably would have been in a position for an MLB call-up.
Yeah, it hasn't been a good year for Jet Williams. He's been a below-average hitter at this point in AAA, but you got to feel bad for the guy when 2 separate times he gets injured the day that a Brewers player gets injured that most likely would have led to his call-up, the other one being the original David Hamilton injury. In July, he got hurt the same day as that. So twice he was probably on the verge of his first big league appearance and ended up getting injured. Maybe he follows the Brandon Woodruff timeline of getting hurt just before your first big league appearance. He didn't make it into the bullpen like Woodruff did back in the day, but maybe he can still find some success at the big league level when he does get that chance. But yeah, it's a tough break for him. Hopefully we figure out what's actually wrong with this hand/wrist injury that he's dealing with, because clearly they thought he was past it. And it was the very first swing that he took back in a game when he re-injured it. So I don't know if that was a matter of I'm sure he was taking BP off of like live machines and like heavy velocity just to test it out, and he felt good. But just the fact that it happened on the first swing in the game looks a little tough for him, and maybe for the diagnosis that he was ready to get back into games. But We'll find out after he sees the specialist whether, this season is in jeopardy, which at this point in the minor leagues, there's probably a decent chance it is.
Final update is Sal Frelick. He's on a rehab assignment in Nashville. He's only DHing right now, though. Not cleared to play the outfield yet as he comes back from that right shoulder injury. Pat Murphy basically explained the rationale as if he can hit, he should hit, and he should get the at-bats, and he should see live pitching. So that's kind of how they're handling it for now. Again, rehab assignments, you can get a little bit of time on those. You can have some runway. So that's kind of how the Brewers are approaching it. And then once he's ready to throw, then he's going to get back into the outfield. So we'll see what that timeline ends up looking like for Sal Frelick. And this is a conversation for later down the road when he does come back. What kind of spot is there going to be for him? Because we have seen Luis Lara show some flashes in right field. Like I said, that is a conversation for a later week. Right now, we have a lot to tackle in the week that was. We'll start with that 3-game series that the Brewers played against the Minnesota Twins to wrap up their homestand. Milwaukee dropping game 1 of this series, a high-scoring affair, 8-6. Twins finished on top. Shane Drowan got the ball in this one. 5 innings, 9 hits, walked 4 guys, struck out 4, 6 earned runs, couple of homers. Really, you can boil basically all of this down to the slider command. Pat Murphy said that much. Shane Drowan acknowledged that much. I wrote about it at Brewer Fanatic ahead of Drowan's start on Thursday night. Not just this outing, but also you can actually trace it back to his Angels outing a little bit too. Just a lot of sliders that are being not only located below the zone, but they're being bounced in the dirt like 55 feet or 57 feet, just not getting particularly close. And that is Shane Drowan's best pitch. His second best pitch is probably his 4-seamer, but sinkers, we're going to throw sinkers instead. It's fine. Not really, but that's a whole nother conversation. Sinker's actually graded out as one of his worst pitches value-wise this year after they added it. We're not going to talk about that right now. The slider is his best pitch, and the point of a short, tight gyro slider, they can sometimes be a little easier to locate in the zone if it's a shorter pitch. They're generally not meant to be as much of an in-zone pitch, though, because the whole idea is that it's not a ton of movement, but it's sharp, late, harsh movement that's happening at the very end of the trajectory because of that bullet spin, that football type spin. The idea is not always so much throwing it in the zone, but getting chases at least somewhat near the zone. And in Drowan's case, he wants to get chases below the zone with that slider. And in order to do that, it needs to look like a strike, or at least close enough to a strike out of hand. It needs to at least look enough like, oh, this could be a fastball that's going to catch the bottom of the zone. That's how the hitter needs to honor it, because by the time he's making a decision on whether or not to swing, it still looks like that baseball has a decent chance to be at the bottom of the zone. Then he swings that late sharp break, even if it's not a lot of break because it's late. That's how you get the chase. He's going to swing over the top of it. That's how you get your swing and miss or your weak contact, your rollover, whatever. When Shane Drowan is bouncing that pitch well in front of the plate in the dirt, then you're not really forcing anybody to chase that. And Pat Murphy said that. Drowan acknowledged it as well post-game. You could really see it in this game that because he was doing that, the Twins could basically eliminate anything that was near the bottom of the strike zone because they knew it was probably a bounce slider. That meant that they were able to attack what Drowan's other bread and butter is, which is attacking the top of the zone with the fastballs. Of the hits that they had in this game, all but one of them came against a fastball. A lot of them, I think 5 of them, came against fastballs that were either belt or higher. That includes sinkers, 4-seamers, cutters, what have you. And the funny thing is, outside of the 2 homers, he was not necessarily hit hard in this game. And that was something that he talked about as well. He said, I feel like I did not get hit as hard as the line looks. And he's right. His average exit velo in this game was like 78 miles an hour. I think his hard hit was like 33%. There were a lot of kind of jam shot hits against cutters and fastballs at the top of the zone. That's all true. But the other part of this is that I think that's that's number one. It's a testament to how good his fastballs can be as well, because there is some deception with the fastballs. But number two, this does come back to the slider, because I think the Twins being able to eliminate the slider, even if that meant they didn't crush the fastballs, it meant that they were able to put the fastballs in play because they were looking up. Even if they didn't hit them hard, even if the movement on the fastballs still led to some jam shots, that's the difference between a whiff and contact. The slider is the difference between a whiff or contact on those high fastballs. And in Drone's case, like he said, they weren't hit hard, but at the same time, he did acknowledge the slider's got to be better because that's kind of the ripple effect of it. They're able to put those pitches in play instead of whiffing on them. Normally, he gets a lot of whiff on the fastball at the top of the zone. That was not the case in this one. He only had 2 four-seam whiffs, only 2 cutter whiffs, well below what he's normally going to get on velocity at the top. So, again, kind of 2 ways to look at this one. Yes, he probably got a little unlucky with some of the batted ball luck. At the same time, though, I think you can argue that he put himself in a position to get a little bit unlucky with the batted ball luck because he didn't have that slider around the bottom of the zone.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit on all of it. I mean, he's trying to go strike to ball with the slider more often than not. And yeah, he does land it in the zone. I don't know the exact numbers, but it feels like it's a pitch when he's going well. He can kind of hit that low corner either side of the plate with it, but it's not one you obviously want landing much higher in the zone. That means it's kind of hanging there and becomes hittable. But when they're uncompetitive completely and you're spiking them, they're starting out low or starting out at the very, very bottom of the zone. And like you said, unless that's a 4-seam, which he doesn't use down there very often, it's a pretty easy take. Eventually, you just start to eliminate half of the zone, basically. And a lot of hitters talk about, as a hitter, you like to try and eliminate half of the zone, and whether that's in or out or it's up and down, it becomes a lot easier when you only have to worry about half of the plate and half of the zone. And when everything that starts down is missing down, all you're doing is looking for stuff that starts probably above like that mid thigh. That's the only stuff that's either going to be in the zone, or it's, if you're looking for it, you can get on top of the fastball like you talked about. That's a pitch he doesn't normally have an issue with guys getting on top of, and no, they weren't crushing them, but when guys are getting to your fastball consistently, and especially fastballs that are up, if they're not popping it up, which I would say if you're getting to it, you're not popping it up. That means you're getting on top of it. You're getting at least on plane with it. Those can be line drive singles, even if they're only 75, 85 miles per hour. Those don't have to be crushed, but they do end up going at an angle that makes it a pretty likely hit. And yeah, it's one of those games where you talked about it. The Angels game was a little similar, at least. He's going to have to find that slider command, or it will be a problem. Like, he's not going to pitch very well if he doesn't have that pitch. It's going to be forever as a pitcher for him. It's going to be a really, really important part of the repertoire. It's going to be a really important part of what he does every time he's out there. Even in a pen roll, he's going to need to have that pitch. So hopefully he finds it again. Like we said, we're recording before his outing on Thursday, so we'll find out a little bit more of how it went by the time this is out. But that's going to be the main thing. If he has that slider going at its even close to its best, I think most outings are going to go well for him, kind of regardless of who he's facing. We've talked about it a lot. We both like Drone a lot. There's a lot of ability there. He's shown really well in most of his outings, but these last couple have shown that if he doesn't have his best pitch going, things start to get hairy pretty quickly, because it does kind of become a, for lack of a better word, like it's kind of, or term, I should say, it's kind of like a one-trick pony type thing, where now it's just going to be a lot of fastballs up, and that's when hitters get to key in on it. And regardless of how good the pitch is, if it's not Ms. velocity, hitters are going to be able to get to it.
Because of that down outing from Shane Drowan, the early 4-0 lead that the Brewers jumped out to was squandered pretty quickly. We're not necessarily going to break down how they got out to that lead. Jackson Churio, though, did stay hot, hit a solo homer as part of that early in the game. But 6 unanswered against Drowan from the Minnesota Twins. Later in the game, the Brewers finding a way to battle back. So I shouldn't say 6 unanswered, because the Brewers did come back to tie it. But Jake Bauers hitting a sac fly, Garrett Mitchell with an infield hit before Antonio Senzatella came in shortly after. He allowed 2 runs in the 6th inning. very quickly got a couple of outs, and there was a double by Ryan Jeffers, and then a couple of bloop hits by Royce Lewis and Josh Bell. That would seal this one for Milwaukee, 8-6 Twins. Brewers would bounce back. Another close one in game two, kind of the similar deals in game two and game three, both 4-3 finals. Brewers winning those ball games. Once again, Milwaukee scored first, but then they were not able to put together a bigger inning. So William Contreras was hit by a pitch to give the Brewers a 1-0 lead. Bases loaded with nobody out. Garrett Mitchell then hits a looping liner to the pitcher. Andrew Vaughn punches out, and Christian Yelich grounds out. So tough scene for the Brewers, not able to add on more there. We'll talk a little more about the offensive struggles as the week progresses. The Twins then answered pretty quickly, 3 runs against Robert Gasser. He was able to battle, and he gave the Brewers a little bit of length, 4 2/3, 7 hits, couple of walks, 2 hit by pitches, 3 strikeouts, 3 earned runs. But again, just not good command, not good control. And we talked about this privately a little bit as this game was going on. I think I told you, man, I just have from start to start, I just have not seen enough outings where he's looked like a big league pitcher. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about his early starts. I think even in some of the outings where the line has been good, even then there's been multiple starts where it's either the ball is right down the middle or it's well outside the zone. And maybe the fact that he hasn't gotten hit in some of those starts is a testament to the stuff. But man, it's just the outings to me are piling up, these outings of just not controlling the baseball. And it was another one of those in this game, even if he was able to do enough to work into the 5th inning.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to give him credit for keeping the Brewers in the game, and especially with probably maybe the worst command I've seen from him in this stretch. And we talked about there's been some bad outings command-wise, but this one was all over the place, multiple hit by pitches, spraying the ball all over. I mean, we kind of talked about at times some of the command issues just being he's leaving stuff over the middle. There was some of that, but this time it was also just spraying the ball and hitting people and missing badly. And it just wasn't, it was not a very good outing. Like I said, give him some credit for keeping him in it. And in the end, the Brewers did win this game because he was able to give them at least a little bit of length and limit the damage. But the Brewers have a 6-man rotation right now. I don't know how much longer they can withstand having a 6-man rotation. And I think he's a pretty clear candidate to be the guy who is out at the time that they do decide they're going back to a 5-man rotation. I mean, we just talked about some of Drowan's struggles the last 2 times out, but between the two, I'm taking Drowan in the rotation over Gasser pretty easily at the moment. And I'm with you. I texted you about this, and I was like, I'm feeling the same as you watching him. And then you look at some of the results, and like, if you take out the Vegas game, which I think is fair for everyone to take out the Vegas games, that series just wasn't real baseball.
And I actually thought the Vegas game was one of the better command starts that he's had.
Right. So like that game was just pure bad luck, basically. And pitching in a terrible hitting or a great hitting environment, poor pitching environment. But if you took that out, like the numbers in I think it was like 9 starts. I don't have it in front of me, but it was around like a 3.5 ERA, and a lot of like the xERA, xFIP, all of that stuff kind of backed up the overall ERA. But when you watch him, it just does not look like a guy who's performing very well. And there were starts in there that were pretty good. We talked about it at the time. He's had some good starts. He's had a few that we kind of were starting to turn like, okay, now he's starting to look a little bit more like a big league pitcher. He's starting to command a little better, but probably the last month or so of starts, that's gone out the window. It really has not looked good. The results have probably been a little better than the overall process. Maybe even a lot better than the overall process for him. Like I said, I think he's the odd man out if and when they do end up going back to a 5-man rotation. And I don't think it'll be a poor decision. I don't think it'll be the wrong decision. I think it would be exactly what should happen. And quite frankly, I think he probably needs to go back to Nashville at that time. I don't think he's a candidate to move into the bullpen. I don't really think his stuff plays up that much in a pen role. And they will at least need to keep him stretched out because despite everything we're saying, he is probably still the 6th best option for the Brewers right now as a starting pitcher. I'm trying to think maybe maybe Coleman Crow, who's been doing pretty decently in Nashville, but he probably still is that guy at the moment. So I would imagine they'll want to keep him stretched out in case there is an injury or something else happens. But I don't know how much longer he can keep a spot in the rotation. And if they go to 5, I don't think there's really all that much of a chance that he does unless someone else gets hurt.
The Brewers did come back, though, to win this one. Bryce Terang with a 2-run single in the 4th to tie it up. And then Andrew Vaughn with a big hit in the 8th to give them the lead, going the opposite way. Chad Patrick, Abner Uribe, Aaron Ashby, and Trevor McGill combining for 4 1/3 scoreless innings to take this one home. Game 3 was Jacob Mizorowski Day, and just knowing the circumstances of tough first 2 games, bullpen was a little thin. I think you're going into this one hoping that, okay, at least you've got Jacob Mizorowski on the bump. He's going to right the ship a little bit. But it was kind of a tale of 2 outings for him. So he did go 6, 3 earned runs. That's a perfectly fine start. 2 homers gave up. So they did put some decent swings on him. I enjoyed watching like the first 4 innings of this start because we have done a lot of whining about the pitch calling when Jacob Mizorowski's been on the mound and William Contreras has been behind the plate. I thought that for the first 4 innings, Gary Sanchez called basically a flawless game for Jacob Mizorowski. Like almost every single pitch that he called, I thought was the right call. It was like 90% fastballs. He threw like 22 consecutive fastballs or whatever it was to start the game. Every time that they did throw a breaking ball, it was either the curveball or a couple sliders in there, not the cutter as the secondary. So you're actually slowing them way down when there are some indications that they're maybe starting to get closer to the fastball, just, based on a couple foul balls or something. It was really, really good. And then you kind of got to the back half of this game and you could see that Mizorowski's command and the quality of the stuff kind of ticked down a little bit. He mentioned post-game, he just said that it being a day game, he felt a little tired, but then when I asked how his legs felt, he said they're fine. I don't know if that's true or not, but we have kind of seen it now since they gave him the layoff and he's trying to build back up, where it is looking a little similar to what we saw early in the year, where if you're going to nitpick the outing, which we will just for the sake of covering our bases here, even though it is a little dumb to some extent to nitpick how good he's been this year, you're getting back to that early season trend of last inning or 2, it seems like physically it's just not quite in sync, and the velocity's ticking down, the command is going away a little bit, and that's kind of where you saw the home runs come into play. Velo down on the fastball, not great spots for it. Just a tale of 2 outings, kind of like I said.
Yeah, both homers were 99-mile-per-hour fastballs, right center cut, middle. It's still not easy to hit that out, to be clear. That's still, a 7.5-foot extension. I didn't see if the shape was down a little bit in terms of the carry on it as we got in, especially the Clemens one. I don't know if it was any worse at that point, but we're still talking about, shape-wise and velo-wise, a pitch that looks like it's over 100. But when you're used to seeing 102, 103, that those few ticks do start to matter. We've talked about it a little bit with the cutter and why we don't love going to it at times. And 99 does start to fall a little bit more into that. Yeah, a hitter can turn that around if they're geared up for, 102, 103 and trying to get to that. So especially if you leave it center cut, middle, more than anything, I think the big point is that we do need to see, as he continues to progress and continues to build back up, we're going to need to see him show that he can hold the velo, hold the command as he goes deeper into games, because the Brewers are kind of relying on it at this point. And again, we'll get to the 6-man talk at some point here, but when they're down a man in the bullpen, they are relying on a guy like Miz to give them deep outings. And 6 innings is not a bad outing. It's not a short outing by any stretch of the imagination, but I would imagine they're really hoping for 7. And going into the 6th, the pitch count was in a plenty fine place. Like, he absolutely could have given you 7 if he had a good, clean 6th inning, if the stuff still looked crisp, but it didn't. So then He barely escaped the sixth with the game tied at that point after a really nice Lara catch. Wouldn't have been a homer, but would have been extra bases, and especially in that weird corner, could have been a triple or something too. So it was that was a nice play to help him kind of escape that inning. But yeah, we don't want to nitpick too much. This is a guy who is pretty easily the front runner for Cy Young right now, and he's having an incredible season. But it is something where the Brewers, I would imagine internally, are also feeling similar. Like, we get it, but we do need you to start to figure this out a little bit again, find the legs, make sure they're built up enough to, go deeper into games and hold the stuff in the velo at that point. So yeah, I don't even want to linger on it too much, where it already feels too negative for everything he's been doing, but it has become a theme. So I think it was worth bringing up here.
We're going to skip ahead to the end of his outing when it was tied. So moving into the late innings, Aaron Ashby was on the mound in relief. Interesting inning because there were some misplays by Bryce Terang at short and then David Hamilton at third. However, Ashby delivered what was probably one of his better outings in recent memory, actually. 3 punch-outs to get out of that one. Then you mentioned Luis Lara. He already made one impressive catch and then crashing into the right field wall in the 10th. This one really stood out to me, and I'm sure it stood out to you for the same reason. He's had that trepidation near the wall as he adjusts to playing right field. You did not see it there. He went full blow into the wall, sacrificing his body to make that catch. And I did ask Pat Murphy if that kind of made that play stand out, and this will make you happy. That's when he said, there's a reason that he started in right field today, even though Garrett Mitchell was not in the starting lineup. He said, I only want to play Luis Lara in right field no matter what, because he has not played there a lot, and he's just got to get used to his surroundings out there. So maybe seeing some evidence of that happening in this one with that catch.
Yeah, if only there was a way to have gotten him reps in right field before he got to the big leagues, but who cares? No, this was a really good catch. Brian Anderson said on the broadcast, and it felt true. It reminded me of Lorenzo Cain when he first came up to the big leagues, made like a crashing into the left field wall in Cincinnati. Just a leaping catch where he sold out, went flying into like their out of town scoreboard that's on the wall out there. So it's kind of the similar type of fencing that he hit. And it did remind me of that. And this was in a competitive game for a competitive team, in a extra innings affair, and one that it saved a run in a game that the Brewers definitely are happy they won at this point after the Padres series. And yeah, just the fact that he was fully willing to go all out for that ball, and there really wasn't a second thought about the ball. And it's been clear when there has been, like, it's starting to change a little bit. You can tell he's getting more comfortable. Not only that, but obviously Milwaukee's also kind of known for having the wider warning track than most teams. So that's an added thing that he has to deal with when he first comes up. But this was one of the better plays I can remember, especially under the circumstances and given what was happening in that game. And then the other part of that is a guy who makes an incredible catch, goes flying and smokes his knee on like the pole of the fence, and immediately had the awareness to get up and fire the ball in with a guy on second base in a situation where any hesitation, and I would imagine they would have tried to send Royce Lewis if they thought there was even a shot at him scoring. So it was just a really, really good defensive play, a heads up play, a nice sign of some growth as he's getting used to playing out there. And we saw another really good play in San Diego. He's looking a lot more like the defender that I watched a lot in the minors, and a guy who I genuinely have always thought. I told somebody this when he was in high A. I said I'd give him a 70 on his glove. I think he's the best outfielder I've seen in the Brewers minor league system. And I still believe that. I think he's going to wind up being the best defensive outfielder the Brewers have had. Maybe Blake Perkins will have an argument for his prime years defensively, because those were pretty incredible. But I think he's going to be really, really good, and we're starting to see the flashes of it and seeing the comfortability. And I think that's exciting, because once he gets comfortable, I think we're going to start seeing some pretty impressive catches. And some of them, kind of like Lorenzo Cain and others, probably won't look super impressive in the moment, but I think he's going to get to a lot of balls that people just normally don't get to, whether he's in center or in right for now.
That catch proved to be a big one because Jake Bowers was then able to walk it off with a base hit to the left to send the Brewers home as walk-off winners. Bryce Terang making a nice diving slide into the plate as well. So you could kind of see throughout this series, like we said, the Brewers did not play well against the Twins overall, but I think you saw enough flashes where they did enough things right to kind of squeak through these games. So a combination of, maybe getting a little lucky in some spots, but also it was a timely at bat by Bowers. He did go the other way when they just needed a base hit. It was good base running, good slide, good catches by Luis Lara, those kind of things. You did not see much of that in San Diego, where the Brewers were pretty handily swept by the Padres, even if two of those games were close. The game one and game three losses were kind of similar stories as well. We'll start with game one, though. San Diego 3, Milwaukee 2. Logan Henderson on the bump was very, very good through 6 innings in this one. However, this is where we start getting back into that 6-man rotation talk. So over that homestand, you could see a couple decisions that were influenced by the 6-man rotation. And Pat Murphy even talking openly about it. You go back to that Shane Drowan start. Shane Drowan got an extra inning because the Brewers were short guys in the bullpen because they had a 6-man rotation. Pat Murphy said that, despite some of the struggles and the fact they didn't look very good, that's why he had to go 5 innings. Robert Gasser's start. Pat Murphy pulled him aside in the dugout after that 3-run inning and said, hey, you just have to pitch deeper because we're a man short in the bullpen. In this game, game one in San Diego, the Brewers have been very, very strict about when they're going to take Logan Henderson out of games because they've maintained that, hey, once he gets to this pitch count threshold, usually somewhere like in the 80s, they said we see from pitch tracking stuff, from biomechanical data, we can tell that the ball just does not come out of his hand quite the same way. And it had never really quite gotten to a point where you could see that tested because they would pull him so quickly. This is the game where they really made an exception, though, pitching him into the 7th inning for the first time in his career. And he looked really good through 6. As soon as he got back out for the 7th, though, he was throwing 89 to 91. The slot was down a little bit, I think. Gives up a 2-run homer to Jackson Merrill on a changeup that he hung down the middle. You could just tell it was not the same guy, and he was just out of gas. So it's unfortunate because, like I said, really good for the majority of this one. And even the final line is still very solid. 6 1/3, 5 hits, 1 earned run, 7 punch-outs, 3 earned, 2 of them coming on homers. And again, that's always going to be the thing for Logan Henderson. When he gets hit, it's going to be home runs. That's just the nature of how his stuff plays. But as long as he's throwing strikes and not giving up a whole lot of other hits in general, it's going to be okay. That was the case in this one. But again, you're pushing a guy because you're short in the bullpen. And this is where you get into that 6-man rotation discussion. There have been times in the past where we've gotten some questions about it, even on the show. Hey, does it make sense for the Brewers to go to a 6-man rotation right now? And we've pretty much always said no, because you now have that limit on how many pitchers you can carry on your roster. So you're limited to 13 pitchers for a 26-man roster. If you have 6 starters, that's 7 guys in the bullpen instead of 8 guys in the bullpen. And just knowing the average length of a start these days, we've always said it's very tricky to operate for an extended stretch with a 7-man bullpen. Now, I think I can understand why the Brewers are doing this way, why they've fought, because the Brewers, for the most part, did not do the 6-man rotation, even when people were wondering if they would. I think I asked Pat Murphy about it last year, and he said, yeah, it's the numbers thing. Like, it's just hard to do the 7-man bullpen. I would assume that right now they're making this exception because it's 17 games in 17 days, 2 West Coast trips. If you do the math, you're basically looking at, okay, maybe this is 2 weeks where we need to tell every starter, hey, you just got to give us 1 more inning in your start, compared to if you don't have the ability to push those guys back a day multiple times, that's a full-blown extra start for a couple guys. And I assume that's what their math is. And I think that does make some sense. However, you're seeing some very big ripple effects here on these games, and they're not necessarily losing games just because they're doing a 6-man rotation. We'll talk about it. The at-bats have not been good lately either. Even the defense has not been as good as it should be. There's a lot of things going on right now, and this is just a small part of it, but it is a part of it. And this was kind of like, I think, the example that is going to stick out the most to people. Logan Henderson just having to get that extra inning, but also, like, you look at the way that they've had to manage the bullpen. I mean, Bryce Wilson was DFA'd and then re-signed, and then they DFA'd the guy that they promoted to replace Bryce Wilson. Like, there's just all kinds of, it's just adding extra steps to the roster math as well to even have 7 available guys or 7 semi-available guys in the bullpen. We'll talk about Abner Uribe later in this series as well, who ended up being unavailable. So they were down to 6 guys essentially. It's hard to do. And because this is just a tough stretch, I think you're choosing a lesser of 2 evils. I'm not quite going to go so far as to say they made the wrong decision here, but at the very least, this stretch here is demonstrating very clearly why a 6-man rotation with the current roster rules just is not a good arrangement in Major League Baseball in 2026.
Yeah, and they even got bailed out a little bit with the timing because they were able to add May in there in the middle of things, and they got a Sproat start and then a May start. So that was essentially a 7-man for one of the stretches through here. It is just really hard to make work, and it's even harder with some of the new they used to have a lot more optionable depth in the minors and in the majors in the bullpen that they could kind of go, okay, yes, we're going to have to send them down for a couple weeks here, but we can kind of use them a bunch for, a couple series. And then all of a sudden we can call up Jake Cousins, Miguel Sanchez, those types when they were doing this very regularly. And some of the rule changes have made it harder to do that. The other part of it is that the Brewers have had a lot of injuries, not only in the big leagues, but also at the minor league level. So there have been a lot of big league caliber guys who maybe would be potential like shuttle arms, people they might be able to option up and down a couple of times this year and feel comfortable doing it with, who just aren't even available, are on the IL, who have struggled when they've been healthy. Like it's just not the same level of healthy depth that they've had in the past. So you can't get as creative, and the creativity ends up having to be, like you said, you DFA a pitcher, and then 3 days later he clears waivers, nobody claims him, he's a free agent, and you immediately sign him back to a big league deal and bring him back onto the big league roster. And Lyon Richardson did his job in his one outing. He did a good job in that Padres game, in this Henderson game that we're talking about, but he has to get DFA'd shortly after because that's where they're at. It's very tough to make this work. And like you said, we can talk about Abner in a few minutes here, but working with a 7-man pen is already tough. Working with a 6-man is really, really tough. And it has felt a little bit like a lot of guys are only being asked to go the 1 inning lately. And I'm curious on that. I don't know if maybe part of it is that they think 1 inning, but the ability to come back the next day is more valuable right now than
it is
a guy giving you 2. Is that the logic?
Yeah,
there?
Murph talked about it a little bit on the last homestand. Because he was getting some questions about what Senzatella's role going to be, and he basically said, nope, it's going to be 1 inning, and it's for the availability reason. He can pitch more if it's just a 1 inning deal. So I'm assuming that's kind of carrying over to just about everybody right now.
Right, which makes sense. If that's the math and that's how they worked it out and that makes more sense to them, then yeah, that makes sense to me. But it is making it where, like, I guess the other part of that is when you have more pitchers entering the game, you're more likely that one of them doesn't have their best stuff that day, that one of them maybe struggles or doesn't have his command that day. The whole thing just, it gets tough to work with. And you combine that with the stretch that they're in, with 2 West Coast trips in the span of 2 weeks, with 17 in 17 days, with not pitching related, but infield injuries and guys in and out of the lineup and stretching that depth as well. It's a lot going on right now, and it's a lot to manage, and it's making things more difficult. And I think you're right. Not only that the logic is there to, it's better than forcing a start out of a starter, but also just, we talk a lot on the show about having a big picture view of things. And I think when you do something like this, it is a big picture move for the Brewers. We want our starters to remain healthy. We don't want Kyle Harrison and Jacob Mizorowski suddenly having to pitch on 4 days rest, which they've rarely done in not only in the season but in their careers, and having to do it 3 times in the span of this 17-17 stretch. Like, you might be able to sneak one out of them every once in a while, but having them have to do it 3 times in a row, I don't think that's a very good idea for either of them, or for Henderson either. Like, those types. So I can fully understand the logic. I don't think they're wrong to do it, but it is making it very difficult on the bullpen. It's making it difficult to get through games, and it's probably left a couple wins on the table that they would normally have gotten, or at least it's given them the opportunity to lose a couple games that they normally would have a pretty high likelihood of winning. And I think we'd be a little hypocritical if we were too hard on them for that, when it is, in my mind, a bigger picture view, because that's something we talk about a lot. So I don't think they're wrong for doing it. I get why people are frustrated. It also is absolutely showing why they don't normally do it. But I can fully see the logic behind it. I think it's something that makes plenty of sense. But in the moment, it is probably at least lowering their chances of winning a couple of these games. And that can be a tough pill to swallow whenever moves like that are made. But I think over 162, you have to do these types of things at times. And I agree with the math. I think what they're doing makes sense, but it can be a tough one to watch as it's happening in the moment.
So that home run that Henderson gave up to Jackson Merrill was a go-ahead shot, and then the only runs that the Brewers were able to score, they were up 2-1 because of a 2-run homer in the second inning by Christian Yelich. Otherwise, a quiet night for the offense the rest of the way, and that would be the theme for the series. Game 2, this one was not close. San Diego 11, Milwaukee 2. A rough night for Kyle Harrison, 4 2/3, 10 hits, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, 8 runs, gave up 3 homers, including a grand slam to Luis Rengifo. That came after, and even that inning where he gave up the brunt of the damage. He did not pitch well, but you had a David Hamilton misplay. Technically, it was a G1 base / David Hamilton misplay, so potential triple play. At the very least, it's a double play. I probably would have gone for the double play. It's a ground ball to third. Hamilton gets the ball, steps on third base, fires to Bay, who has to stretch for the ball. Bay drops the ball. He should have caught the ball, but also it was not a good throw by David Hamilton, because the second baseman should not have to extend like a first baseman on second base. At that point, you've already ruined your chance at making a turn there. Also, it was kind of an interesting decision to begin with, because Hamilton's momentum in going to third is taking him toward third, and then he's recontorting his body to try to throw to second base. It's not the worst decision, but I think you could also make an argument for just go with step on third and fire to first and get your 2, as opposed to maybe trying the higher upside but also higher risk play. After that happened, it opened the floodgates, because you only get 1 on that play, and then you have the grand slam that comes later in the inning. Regardless, though, it was not a good night for Kyle Harrison. Fastball command was not there, was just kind of spraying it around for a good chunk of this game. The velo was down, too. He was sitting more 92, 93 for a lot of this one, especially when he came out for that rough second inning. He also did not sound super happy that William Contreras was calling more sinkers in this game. Now, I'm actually going to play devil's advocate here. If I'm William Contreras, my answer would not be to necessarily call more sinkers in this one, because the sinker is just a worse version of the four-seamer. But when the four-seamer is being sprayed around, and it's getting hammered, I can't exactly fault a catcher for saying, we just got to try something else. And I think that's kind of what was going on here. So believe it or not, this is actually going to be the first time where I'm probably going to side more with William Contreras on this one, because I do think you just need to try something else at that point, and that's what he did. Obviously, it didn't work, and I wouldn't really expect it to work. Probably not the adjustment I would make, but I can see why he did it here. I can see what the logic is. So it was just not a great night for Kyle Harrison, and then also the Brewers obviously not helping him out either. But the theme of this game was everything was bad for the Brewers.
Yes, it was one of those games that if it just happens during a normal stretch of baseball, everyone's just kind of like, yeah, tough game. Oh well, who cares? When it happens when they haven't been playing very well generally, and then they obviously end up getting swept in the series, I think it looks a lot worse, and people will probably read into it a lot more. I'm with you on. I think the only argument that I would have is that he went to the sinker. This was in that second inning. He started going to the sinker, and at that point, no, he wasn't getting a ton of whiff, but he very easily could have been out of the inning at that point. He wasn't really pitching terribly at that point, and that was when the floodgates kind of opened, is when he started to throw the sinker a little bit more. So I can at least understand that logic. The other part of it is that it seems clear to me with the way Harrison's talking about the sinker, he has zero trust in his sinker. And if a pitcher has no belief in his pitch, it probably shouldn't be getting thrown. But that's more his fault than Williams. And I do agree that in this spot, just generally, if the fastball's not getting swing and miss, which it obviously that's a huge part of what Harrison has done this year, is get a lot of swing and miss with the four seam. You do and eventually have to try some other stuff. And we saw like a first pitch changeup to Tatis. I don't know that that's the type of stuff I would try either, but that ended up getting crushed for a homer because he left it up in the zone. It more than anything else, Kyle Harrison just pitched very poorly and did not have his best stuff in this game. So this game comes back way more to that. The double / potential triple play ground ball. I think the biggest thing is that Hamilton's momentum was taking him towards third, obviously, but he had no reason to be completely off balance when he made the throw to second base. Like, just set your feet up, push off of, like, hit it with your right foot and get your body turned towards second as you're doing that. It reminded me a little bit of, it's not the same thing, but I remember the Yelich walk-off against the Cubs where Chris Bryant made like a sliding play to his right, and he went to step on third and throw across with the bases loaded, and Yelich beat it. It was 2018, I believe. And instead of Bryant like hitting the base and throwing it, he hit the base and then shuffled into a throw to first. And it was one of those things where it's like, I've played third base. When you do that, you want to hit the right foot on the base, and then you want your left foot going right into the throw. Like, you're stepping into the throw as you step on the base. And it wasn't the same. Obviously, Bryant shuffled, Hamilton fell away, but it just reminded me of that, whereas like you can use that base actually as like a stop for you to lead into a throw, and Hamilton didn't do that at all. Bay absolutely should have still caught that ball. We don't need to talk much about Ji-Hwan Bae. He's not a good baseball player, and I don't think he's going to help the Brewers much while he's here, but they were pretty desperate for anybody given all of the injuries that happened in the span of like 4 hours, basically, with Ortiz, Pratt, and Jet Williams all going down. Literally, it had to have been within 4 hours. They all had their injuries happen. So they got desperate. I wish they would have signed Jorge Mateo while he was out there. That one felt like a slam dunk to me, given the situation. But the Rays picked him up, so he's no longer out there and available. Either way, this was a play that absolutely should have been 2 outs. It could have been 3 outs if it was cleanly made. Like, there was a view that Adam McCalvey tweeted out that if it was clean, it would have been 3. Like, it would have been a pretty easy one, to be honest. Like, Ty France is very slow. But it just wasn't well played, and it escalated. And at that point, the Brewers had their chance to kind of answer back. They got a couple guys on right away and ended up only scoring 1 in the third on that Churio ground out. And then after that, the floodgates fully opened and it was over. But Luis Rengifo hitting a grand slam felt like I knew that was going out when he stepped to the plate in that moment. You just it was either like a gap shot or a grand slam coming up. It was bound to happen. The guy has like an 890 OPS with the Padres since he got there, I believe. He made some nice plays in left field in game 3. I couldn't tell you what's going on with that one, but he's been pretty solid for them. So good for him. I will say this. Nobody seemed to have any complaints about him. He seemed like a nice guy, a good teammate. So good for him that he's doing well, but very unfortunate for the Brewers that a big moment came against them.
A rough finish in game 3. This one may be a contender for one of the worst losses of the year. 4-3 Padres in extras. Dustin May gave the Brewers exactly what they needed in his second start with Milwaukee. 7 innings, 4 hits, 2 walks, 6 punch-outs. The only earned run, a Xander Bogaerts solo homer. He actually went back out to start the 8th, but walked the leadoff man and was then pulled. Offensively, Brewers did enough to take a lead into the late innings. Gary Sanchez with an early solo homer. Bryce Terang with an RBI single. Brewers had more chances to add on once again and couldn't, kind of drawing back to some earlier games from the week. We're going to fast forward to Aaron Ashby's inning in the 8th. Padres tie it on a chopper to first. So for a little bit of context, Chad Patrick was actually the first man out of the bullpen and did not pitch well at all. Just sprayed the ball all over the place. So then you're turning to Aaron Ashby for the lefty matchup. There's that chopper to first. Aaron Ashby has never been particularly quick to get to first base, and the sobering aspect of this play is it was not a lack of effort. If you watch the replay, as soon as he could, and Ashby does fall off toward third base a little bit, as soon as he could, he gave it everything he could to get to first, and he just got beat. Just did not move quick enough, even though he was trying. So that's a tough one. Scores Fernando Tatis from second. And that's also the big thing about this play as well. Not only is Ashby late to get there, he then does not turn around to look at the guy who went to third. So Tatis is able to score from second. Padres tie it. We're going to fast forward a little bit. Once again, Trevor McGill is the next man out of the bullpen. Garrett Mitchell made a great diving catch to send it to extras. And then the Brewers were able to get something going later in the 11th inning. Top of the 11th, an RBI double from Gary Sanchez that scores the zombie runner from second base. He moves to third on a wild pitch. Garrett Mitchell walks and steals second. So the Brewers, once again, in a very good position here to add on. And when you are the road team in extra innings, you have to try to shoot for multiple if you can, because you know that home team is going to have a placed runner in the bottom half, probably going to take multiple runs, or at least more likely to require multiple runs to win the ball game. This is where it gets rough for the bottom of the Brewers order. Adrian Morejon is on the bump. One of the better left-handed relievers in the game, spraying the ball around. And when you're facing a very, very good stuff reliever, sometimes that's just kind of what you have to hope for. You have to hope that he comes out and he's not locating the baseball, and you can just kind of wait him out and then wait for your mistake in a hitter's count. The Brewers could have done that in this inning, and Jake McKibben did a great breakdown on it at Brewer Fanatic. You should go read that if you haven't yet. Basically, they decided that they were going to bail him out of the inning. David Hamilton strikes out swinging. He got one pitch in the zone the entire at-bat in a left-on-left, and it was big swings. It was the stuff that Pat Murphy's talked about a lot, the front side flying open. That's an unproductive at-bat. Joey Ortiz then sees 0 pitches in the strike zone and just swings at everything. Another non-productive at-bat. Because you have 2 outs at that point, that opens up an intentional walk of Jackson Chourio. Instead of forcing the Padres, I should say, to pitch to him, he's intentionally walked. Then you have the Bryce Terang left-on-left matchup. Morejon was dialed back in at that point, and he put him away very easily.
I've talked about it on here. Like, I don't get super frustrated watching Brewer games anymore. Like I used to a lot when I was younger. And most of the time it's just, I get annoyed, but it's baseball. A lot of stuff happens. These were the 2 at-bats from Hamilton and Ortiz were about as, I was upset. I was mad watching them take those at-bats. And it was a culmination of a lot of bad at-bats in these types of situations lately. I'll say this about Hamilton, like that is always going to be a tough matchup. That is one of the best lefties in the league against a lefty batter. David Hamilton's just generally not that good of a hitter, so this is already just not a matchup in his favor. But like you said, when a guy is spraying he just walked the last lefty he faced in Mitchell. He threw a wild pitch during that at-bat. He's all over the place. If you're David Hamilton, the odds of you actually getting a hit in that spot are pretty slim. You could go up there and put the bat on your shoulder and until there's 2 strikes. And I don't think that would be a bad plan at all for a guy like him in that spot. With Gary Sanchez being on third, this is another part of the equation here. You couldn't bunt. Bunting was not an option at that point, obviously, because you're not scoring Gary Sanchez on any bunt. And you also are going to have to hit a ball pretty deep if you're going to score him. Like a routine medium deep fly ball is not getting the job done, especially with like Tatis's arm and right and some of the arms they have in that outfield. Like you were going to have to lift the ball pretty deep, and that's not a David Hamilton strength. So he's probably going to need a hit if he was going to score Gary in the end. But that's a spot, again, where just make the guy throw pitches. I think back to, must have been 2 years ago, Andres Munoz, great stuff for the Mariners. And the Brewers basically just let him walk in the game-winning run in one of the games where he was just spraying the ball all over the place. He wasn't missing terribly, but they were like, until we get 2 strikes, we're basically not swinging because you haven't shown us you can throw 3 pitches in the zone to any batter yet. And they won a game doing that. And that's the type of...
And the misses got worse as that inning progressed because they weren't chasing. You could kind of see the pressure was dialing up on him.
Right. And they've done that a lot over the last few years. And again, Jake McKibben's article broke a lot of this down and made a lot of very good points. And he kind of pointed back to the NLCS last year and how a lot of this has looked similar to that this year, or lately, I should say. And it has. Like, it looks like a team that's trying to do too much. And Jake Bauers had a quote saying, I think we need to just calm the F down right now. And I think there's truth to that. It looks like a team that is trying to do way too much when they're in these spots. And the Brewers have won these games and been so good in these situations the last few years because they don't try to do too much. They try to just do their job. They talk about passing the baton. They talk about all of that stuff all the time. And it just feels like it's not out of selfishness. I think people are probably going to say, oh, they're trying to be heroes. They're being selfish. They want to have the big hit. I don't buy that. I don't think that is the case. I think right now they're in a tough stretch of games and they desperately want to win games and they're chasing wins and they're chasing, I need to like help my team here. It's not a selfish thing. It's, I want to help the team instead of, I just need to do my job, whatever that may be, whether it's watching 4 pitches go by, whether it is, fouling off a close pitch on 2 strikes, the type of stuff they've been really good at for most of the last, really this whole stretch of winning baseball for the Brewers. This has been a key to it. It's been something they've been good at. It's been even better since Murph took over. They're losing a little bit of that right now. And again, it's not a selfishness thing. It's not a hero ball thing. I really don't believe it is. But I think it is guys pressing to try and help the team to a level that you end up not helping the team. You end up making things worse. So again, I'll give Hamilton a little bit of, that's a tough at bat, but also let's use our head. He just walked a lefty. He just threw a wild pitch. Let's at least make him get in the zone before we even start thinking about trying to get a hit here. Then Joey Ortiz goes up and he just watched Hamilton chase a couple pitches and watched him still not really able to get in the zone. And I'll say this, for Joey Ortiz, a pitch up and away is a pitch that he has shown he can hit that ball deep enough to right field. He can line a ball to right field. Like, that's a pitch that he's done pretty decently with at times if it's in the zone. But these were not. These were above the zone. And then the 2 changeups he chased in the dirt, I'm still not even sure he actually fouled off the pitch they said he got a piece of. I think he might have barely clipped it, but either way, none of those pitches were very close to the zone, and it was just a poor at-bat. It was not a good approach. It just both of them. It was about as bad as I've seen, and we've seen some bad at-bats from guys. But given the circumstances, given the fact that he was spraying the ball, he wasn't close to the zone on a lot of pitches. I just don't really know what the approach was when they went up there. It just didn't feel like there was much of an approach when both of them went up there. And yeah, once Terang came up, Morejon pretty much painted the up and in corner 3 times, and Terang got a piece of one of them, and then he threw a slider that started in the exact same spot as those and ended up on the outside corner, and Terang swung and missed. But that was a legitimately just, that's great pitching. I wouldn't expect any lefty to be able to do anything with those pitches. Like, and once there's 2 outs, I'm also not really expecting a hitter to get the job done. You just hope he does, but there's a lot fewer avenues to getting a job done when there are 2 outs. The first 2 guys had the opportunity to get things done, and those were terrible at-bats. And it was one of those moments where you could kind of feel, yes, the Brewers just took the lead, but the odds of them getting another clean extra inning outing here without giving up even the zombie runner felt very low. You were kind of hoping at that point that you just get to the 12th, because that's kind of what it felt like to me. I didn't really think they were going to get out of it with 0 runs and a win after that, because you had this opportunity to add on. Like you said, when you're the road team, you have to do that, at least to feel like you actually deserve to, or you have a very good chance of winning this game when you go to the bottom half. So that was a frustrating game at the end of a frustrating series, a frustrating inning. That was about as upset as I've been watching a game in a long time. So I don't blame people for being upset. I told you before we started, I think people are going overboard, which I get it. Fandom, people have, this is how people watch sports. It's fine, but I think people are getting a little over the top with the reactions. But I also do not blame anybody for being upset after watching that series, because it was tough. And we've talked about the Brewers are in a very tough stretch. It's not even like I don't understand how some of this is happening for the Brewers. There's a lot of reasoning behind some of this stuff happening with, again, 2 West Coast trips in about 2 weeks, 17 and 17, injuries on the offensive side of the ball, short bullpens, all this stuff. Like, it adds up to something like this potentially happening. But when you're watching it and you see all these missed opportunities, and I think the Brewers ended up 3 for 26 with runners in scoring position or something in this series, that's going to be frustrating no matter what. So I don't blame people for being upset. I think things will be okay, and we might talk about that a little bit more later. But this was the first time that I watched a game this year, and like, I don't yell in my apartment, but I wanted to yell in my apartment about what was happening during that 11th.
We can just go straight into that discussion, because I think everybody knows what happened in the bottom half.
Yeah.
To close out that sweep. So obviously there's a lot of takes flying around right now. And I think that general rule of thumb for criticism to be valid and to hold weight, you also need to be understanding of the context and the full circumstances and have a little bit of a bigger picture view. That's something we try to do on this show. I don't know how successful we are all the time, but we do criticize a lot while also at least trying to understand the bigger picture, or maybe give credit where credit's due, things like that. So here's where things sit right now. I think it is very important to acknowledge this stretch that the Brewers are in. 17 games in 17 days. I think the 2 West Coast trips, that's a way bigger deal than the 17 and 17, because not only is that just, tough matchups, longer stretches, any travel like that where you're just going back and forth and it's 17 straight is tough, but West Coast is also the bigger time jump that you could make from the central time zone compared to if you were going out to the East Coast. It's longer travel. This whole stretch did start with the Brewers plane sitting on the runway for several hours. They got off to a very bad start with this first round of West Coast travel, but that's multiple significant time zone jumps without days off. So I don't know that it's really talked about enough about how, like, that's probably messing with internal clocks a little bit. The fact that they're doing this back and forth, and no days off. So that's not a full excuse, but I think it's worth acknowledging. Then you have the stuff with the rotation and the bullpen, and, Abner Uribe having to throw 55 pitches just based on circumstances over the weekend. So the Brewers basically ruled them out for this entire Padres series. There is a lot going on right now that is working against the Brewers. Now, like I said, that's not an excuse for lousy defense, bad approaches. Really, it's not an excuse for the bad approaches and the bad swing decisions is really what it is. If they're still making smart swing decisions and they're just not hitting, okay, whatever. But those at-bats in the 11th inning in particular, which are kind of a theme of the week, those cannot happen regardless of the context, and I get it. It's tricky. when we talk about baseball being a mental game, I don't think enough people realize that can be what baseball being mentally tough looks like, where I would be willing to guess there's a decent chance that these guys know what they should be doing when they step into the box. And then all of a sudden the pitch comes in and you just next thing you know, you're swinging at it and maybe you can't even explain why. That's baseball being mentally tough, where most of these guys know what they have to do a good chunk of the time. It's in that moment actually physically being able to apply it because you don't have this little mental trigger going off that's just kind of tensing you up in the moment. And I would guess that's kind of what's going on with these guys right now. And again, this is Major League Baseball. At the end of the day, no excuse is good enough for that. You have to be able to figure that out and you have to be mentally strong enough, but it's not easy. And they are in a stretch that is testing that to the extreme, I think. So more than anything, I want to see them. I want to see what it looks like when they come out of this stretch, because I just don't think you can put any team through this kind of schedule and expect that they're going to look great by the end of it. So when we're thinking about where the Brewers are at, where they're going, where are things going to end up, because the division race has grown tighter. The Brewers still own the best record in baseball, but the Cubs are within, as of this recording, 3.5 because they did lose. So if the Brewers win one against the Dodgers on Thursday, it would be back up to 4 and you're feeling a little better. But the division lead has shrunk. The Brewers are playing some of their worst baseball of the year. And even before this stretch, we did have a few episodes where we kept saying, hey, they're not at their best right now, but they're still winning some games. And now you add this onto it. I can understand why people are concerned. This was not going to be easy to get through, though. So to me, I need to see where they are in like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep, I agree. I don't think I remember when the schedule originally came out. Brewer fans and everybody who paid attention to the Brewers schedule kind of singling this part of the schedule out as like, oh yeah, that's going to be a tough stretch. Like that's going to be really difficult with the West Coast trips, the 17 and 17. As you kind of get into what most people would kind of consider the dog days of the season, when you're getting into this August stretch where it's getting longer, you don't necessarily feel like you're right in the heat of the pennant race. So there's not that push towards the very end of the season, the playoffs, that you kind of get, that boost that you get. And it's obviously just, it's a tough stretch in terms of opponents too. Pretty much everyone they've been playing in this 17 and 17 stretch has been, Pirates kind of fell off, but they were at the deadline only a couple games out of the wild card. The Twins are in the hunt. The Padres have been really hot, quite frankly. They've been playing really well lately, and they are back in the hunt for sure. And then now you have the Dodgers, who at the time going into the series are not very hot, but I don't know that that's a good thing for the Brewers. That feels like that's bound to turn at any moment here. So that could end up being bad timing for the Brewers, that they're kind of due to break out of some things, but hopefully not. We'll find out. It's a tough stretch, and I do want, like, I saw a couple people on Twitter talking about how the Brewers struggle coming out of the deadline all the time because they don't do anything. And the Brewers won their 14 in a row, like immediately following the deadline last year, and they didn't do anything at the deadline other than Brandon Lockridge and Shelby Miller. So I don't think that's a real thing. I don't think that's a connected thing here anyway. And I would argue that this was one of their bigger and better deadlines in a long time in terms of adding to the big league team. And Dustin May has been quite good in his first 2 starts, and I don't even think we've seen the best version of him in those first 2 starts. So it's one of those things where it's a long stretch for the Brewers. It's a long stretch for fans. So I think people just, West Coast trips in general, I think people stay up late for games, start to get a little more ornery when things don't go well. And I get it, because I probably am similar. But I'm with you. I think we need to see where we're at in a couple of weeks. I don't want to say the Brewers and Cubs have 7 games at the beginning of September. There's a pretty decent chance that's like a 4-3 split. That wouldn't be surprising at all. But that stretch also has a very real possibility of kind of extending or flipping the lead if one team plays better than the other, significantly better in that stretch. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen still, regardless of what happens over the next few days. I think the Cubs are playing. Are they finishing a series with the Nationals today, or are they going into? Yeah, they must be. I don't know who they have coming up. To be quite honest with you, I rarely know what's happening with the Cubs. I find out because other people get really mad and start tweeting about it. If it comes down to the wire and we're in September, I'll probably be paying close attention to the Cubs games. But for now, it's still just hopefully the Brewers play well. That's what all that really matters to me at the moment. And they're not playing well. So I get it. People start to look at the Cubs, start to see what's happening there. Like Jack said, they lost today. We'll see what the Brewers do today. If the Brewers win, it's a 4-game lead. I think if anyone told you before the season the Brewers had a 4-game lead going into the middle of August here, everyone would feel fine about it. And even if it was a 3-game lead, everyone would feel fine about it. But when you're in the moment, when things are going really poorly, it does feel like it's kind of, snowballing. It starts to feel like everything's going to fall apart. I would probably say the opposite is what the Cubs felt the same way a couple of months ago when the Brewers seemingly couldn't lose to anybody. The Cubs were losing a lot of close games. It's just kind of the swing of a season. And I'm not saying the Cubs can't win the division. I think they absolutely can. But I talked about it on the Milwaukee's Tailgate podcast this weekend. A lot of the expected stats during this really hot stretch for the Cubs have been much worse than the overall numbers. And pitching wise, they're always going to overperform, I think, because their defense is quite literally the far and away the best in baseball right now. I don't have the updated numbers in front of me, but I know what they were on Sunday. Since the All-Star break through Sunday, they had a 4.05 expected ERA and a 2.95 ERA. That's over a run in difference is not something the defense usually is making up for. That's above and beyond what defense normally can account for. And then their expected weighted on base average was about 30 points higher than their actual, or their weighted on base average was about 30 points higher than their expected weighted on base average. They're playing very well. They're also probably getting a lot of breaks to go their way during the stretch. The Brewers are not playing well. Prior to the Padres series, you could probably argue they were getting a decent chunk of breaks to go their way in a lot of the close games that they were winning because they haven't played great for a while now. But a lot of their expected numbers actually line up very closely. On Sunday, both their weighted on base and expected were exactly 321 at the time since the All-Star break. Their expected ERA and ERA were about 0.1 different, and it was actually underperforming the expected ERA. So I think when we take the big picture look, I think if you look at it through that lens, you can probably start to feel a little bit better about where things are and understand that this is part of the season. This is a tough part of the season. It's part of every season. The Brewers still have, I believe the Rays technically just passed them for the best record in baseball, but they're second best in baseball. And they haven't played great for about a month, and they're still in that spot. I don't think the Brewers are destined to keep playing the way they've played the last month. I think they're going to have another uptick in production, in play, in probably some just good luck in terms of offense. And then also, I don't buy that they're suddenly the worst team in baseball with runners in scoring position. I don't think that's a real thing. So they'll probably go back to a 5-man rotation. They'll get a normal bullpen set up. They do have another stretch of a lot of games without off days. So there's going to be a lot of that. It's a tough schedule, no doubt about it. But people can believe whatever they want. They can feel however they want. That's part of being a fan. But personally, while I wouldn't say I'm oozing with confidence that the Brewers are going to win the division, if I had to predict it, I still think the Brewers are going to win the division.
My take is early in the year, the Brewers are playing really, really well when the Cubs were underperforming. Now the Cubs have been playing really, really well as the Brewers have been somewhat underperforming, and the lead is still 3.5 to 4 games. So people need to realize that the Brewers, I think, are still far more in the driver's seat than it looks right now. That doesn't mean you get complacent. That doesn't mean it has to get better than this for that to remain the case, and
Yes.
we're both counting on that happening. But I still would not be too worried about the division. Now, playoffs, that's a different conversation because if you ask me honestly, do I think this group will hit well in the playoffs? I'm going to say no. Because I think it's going to be the same story as last year where they are so reliant on stringing things together, and I think we have enough evidence that over the course of a long season that does seem to work for them. But when you're in the postseason and you're tired and you're facing very, very good pitching, some of the best that baseball has to offer, including some of the best starting pitchers, and you don't have the fallback of being able to drive the baseball when the quantity of hits dries up, you're in very real trouble. And that, frankly, is still exactly the case for this lineup. But it's also a tricky situation because I don't know what exactly they could have done at the deadline to fix that. I think if anything, you can probably, if you're gonna pin it on anything, I would trace it back to, again, their lack of hitting development, just the kind of profiles that they've chosen to emphasize in recent years, where it's given them a pretty good floor, but maybe they haven't gone for ceiling enough. But mainly the hitting development that they have guys up and down the lineup who could hit for power, and they just cannot get them to figure this out. That's really what it comes down to. But if we're just talking about the regular season right now, I think it's going to be okay.
Yep, agreed. And yeah, playoffs are definitely a different story. We've talked about that for a long time. I didn't get the chance to talk about the deadline, but I'm with you. It's very easy to say they should have gone out and added power. And the one argument you could have is that, DH should be open for business. It wasn't going to be. If we're being honest, it was not going to be something that they brought someone in and Christian Yelich didn't play anymore. That it wasn't going to happen. Third baseman, there weren't options. Like, I know that's an obvious, like, oh, get power at third base, but there have to be people moving for you to do that. And I also see on Twitter people saying stuff like, well, just if you pay enough, people will make trades. Like, to an extent, yes. Like, there were probably guys who were available for the right price. If you wanted to trade Jesus Medey and Luis Pena for CJ Abrams and try and teach him third base and think that was the move that would get you to the World Series, I mean, more power to you. I wouldn't fit that in that boat. I wouldn't think that would be something that would change things. I think the most unfortunate one that they missed out on, that they really didn't have an option, was Luis Garcia from the Nationals. And he's a first baseman only at this point, and Jake Bauers and Andrew Vaughn are not the problem offensively. So that makes things pretty difficult. So yeah, again, we don't need to do the deadline thing. You guys already talked the deadline last week, but that's something I kept seeing, and I get it to an extent, but at the same time, you have to be realistic, and those options just were not out there for them to upgrade.
Let's pivot to a couple listener questions before you get to resume your minor league sandbox. We'll start with Frederick, who asked a fun question after a not so fun series. Who is the Cy Young of the Brewers batters, meaning the best pitcher of the position players? Serious and fun answers are both allowed and encouraged. I got to say Andrew Vaughn, just for the knuckleball.
So Andrew Vaughn would be my real answer as well, because I did take a quick peek to see the history of anybody who had pitched. And Andrew Vaughn was a legit 2A when he first started at Cal. He was a pitcher for his first 2 years at Cal. He only pitched 1 inning his second year. He threw about 9 his first. And I even found an article when searching for it that he thought he was going to be a pitcher all through high school. And even when he first arrived at Cal, he thought that was his future, was on the mound. So that would be my real answer as to if you needed somebody to actually go out and try and pitch, he'd probably be the guy. The knuckleball makes him a fun answer as well, but I thought Gary's outing was pretty fun in this one. Showing like an easy 88 without trying was an impressive thing from a guy that size. And obviously he's got like the big, he was throwing, what every catcher does. And that's just a huge loopy ephus type pitch. And then my other random answer after seeing Lara's throw to the plate and having seen him throw a lot in the minors is, I feel like he could create some pretty fun angles from his very short stature. Like Luis Lara maybe like a Marcus Stroman type of pitcher if he got the chance to pitch on the mound regularly, the shorter guy with a low release height, and maybe, teach him some other pitches, but creating some fun angles. Those would be my fun answers. But I think if I had to pick one to actually go out on the mound and pitch, Andrew Vaughn's the one with the highest level experience. Pretty much none of the other Brewers even pitched in high school, I found when I was looking this up. So that was a little bit surprising. But yeah, I did enjoy a fun question. So thank you.
Go back to some serious content. We got another question. Why is Joel Kuno on the 40-man when they're running out of optionable good relievers and he is neither good nor optionable? So really the answer to this question is why not?
Right.
Right now, Joel Kuno is on a rehab assignment. If you are still in a good spot when he comes back from the rehab assignment, then you DFA him. If somebody gets hurt as he's working his way back, then you can activate Joel Kuno and you just have that depth. That's really all it is at this point, I think.
Yep. There's not really an optionable reliever waiting to go up and getting his spot taken by Joel Kuno at the moment either. That's kind of the other part of the equation. So if they DFA'd Bryce Wilson after like a 4-inning outing again, which is a possibility, I would say, if that happens, and you're looking for a guy to bring up, like Cameron Wagoner just went on the IL with not an arm thing. It's lower half and he should be fine, but he's not available right now. Mark Manfredi would have been an option, but he was part of the Senzatella trade, so he's not available. Will Childers had a really good start to the year, has been quite bad for a while now. Blake Holub maybe would be an option, but like we're talking slim pickings for a guy to come up and take that spot. So at the moment, it just doesn't hurt anything. And like you said, Jack, if someone else gets hurt and he's ready to come off the IL, I think they're probably still going to view him as the best option of the guys that they would have available to them anyway. So, yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to at this point.
Also, the biggest thing with Kuno, he's been bad because he has not thrown strikes. But the thing is, that's arguably been the one thing he's always been good at for his career is throwing strikes, even when he's been more hittable and his stuff has been worse. So I think if you're the Brewers right now, you're looking at, okay, there's been this uptick in the stuff, which is legitimately pretty solid now that he's sitting in the upper 90s with some depth on a sinker. You're seeing that the stuff has ticked up, and the only difference is he's not throwing strikes, but historically, that's the thing he's been good at. Now, at the end of the day, it's just Joel Kuno, so I don't think that you stretch it out too long, but I can understand why you would give a little runway there to see if that hashes itself out.
Right. I think the argument in the other side of things would be, is he getting to better stuff by changing things up and it's causing the lack of command? So, but I'm with you. Like, I think if you need it, it's worthwhile to see if he can marry the strong command he's usually had with the new improved stuff. Like, I still think that's going to be a better option than most of the people that you would have in AAA and have the ability to call up at the moment.
Closet Brewer fan asked on Twitter, why wasn't Luke Adams called up instead of the Brewers signing Ji-Hwan Bae? I'm going to let our resident prospect expert take the first crack at that one.
Well, I think a big part of it was Adams would be a third baseman at best if you're talking anywhere but first base. Joey Ortiz wasn't the one going on the IL at the time. It was Cooper Pratt. You didn't know if Joey Ortiz was going to need an IL stint, but he wasn't the one that was going there at the moment. And you could put Andrew Vaughn at third. You could still play Hamilton at third. You can obviously, we've seen they can at least put Turang at short, and I don't think they want to put Bae at short. That seems pretty clear at this point, but they at least feel comfortable putting Turang over there or Hamilton. I think that's the main reason. Now, the secondary reason is that even if they wanted to right now, Luke Adams had back spasms and is now on the IL in Nashville as well. So it's kind of incredible. In the span of about 4 days, like 4 or 5 big league options all got hurt in the infield. And again, it just kind of adds on to what we talked about before, where yes, they're not playing poorly, but it's also there's a lot going against them at the moment. And again, not to rehash the whole trade thing, but I saw a bunch of people saying, well, this is why you trade for depth. And you can't trade for major league depth that accounts for 4 or 5 people suddenly getting hurt at the same time, especially because you can't option all the guys and you wouldn't have had room on the big league roster to actually do that. So again, I think the one thing they might have missed out on here is Jorge Mateo. I think that would have been the one move that would have made a lot of sense to me. But that's a two-way street. Jorge Mateo could see it and say, yeah, they want to sign me, but then they want to cut me in 2 weeks when everyone's healthy again. And the Rays are offering me, an actual roster spot that I think I'm going to get to keep for the rest of the season. So it doesn't mean they didn't show interest or even have, an offer on the table, but it doesn't mean he just automatically signs with your team when you do that. So, I think more than anything, it's just this is about as bad of injury luck as you can have at like a specific set of players in terms of infielders in a span of not even a single week.
Final big league question we'll take is, if you were the manager, how would you be splitting time between Gary Sanchez and William Contreras right now? Well, I can tell you that at the very least, Gary Sanchez would be catching every Jacob Mizorowski start.
Yes.
I said this on, I think it was 1250 a few days ago. Sparky and Mason Crosby asked me what my lineup would be in a playoff game right now. One of the things I said was, if it's a Jacob Mizorowski start, or honestly, I think I said I'd do this for quite a few games at this point if things hold where they're at now. Gary Sanchez would catch and William Contreras would DH. I just don't want to go into especially a Jacob Mizorowski start and lose that game because William Contreras called cutters. Yeah. And the other reality is basically the only thing separating William from Gary right now as a defensive catcher is the throwing. William has been legitimately fantastic at that. That is the one thing you can look at and say that he's been elite. Gary's not good at that. To be clear, Gary's not a good defensive catcher overall, but really this speaks to how far William has regressed as a catcher in every area except base stealing, whether it's pitch calling, whether it's framing, whether it's blocking. Many of the other responsibilities of a catcher, and even the things that we have given him credit for, like just controlling a pitcher's emotions, Gary Sanchez has also gotten very good reviews on that as well. So the reality is there's just not a whole lot separating these two. And if you don't have Christian Yelich playing well, I trust William Contreras' bat more. And this is where I'm also going to side with William a little bit. His approach, I think, has been very bad. Like, he swings way too much, especially at first pitches. But he does at least have some slightly better underlying numbers than the results. So I think that there needs to be a little leash there. And he's also just still actually been a slightly above average hitter, even by the results. But when you look at this entire lineup, for the rest of the regular season, I would go a lot closer to 50-50 between those two. And then, like I said, if it was a playoff game, but most nights I think my lineup probably would be Gary Sanchez as a starting catcher and William Contreras is DHing.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's a lefty starter on the mound for the other team, he has to be in the lineup, whether it's DHing or catching, whichever one it is. But yeah, I'm with you. I kind of had the 50-50 split in my mind too. Like, that's about where I'm at. And it's kind of funny. I think it took Williams' bat coming down to earth and really, quite frankly, struggling, at least in terms of results, for a while now. Now everyone has kind of started to talk about the pitch calling and all the defensive struggles and everything. And it's kind of funny to see that play out now. Like, and I get it too. Like, you can deal with some of the pitch calling and the defensive struggles when the bat is there. But when the bat's not there, it starts to become more noticeable and it starts to become a bigger issue for most people. I'm with you. I think I said the same thing for Chourio, and Chourio I was less worried about than William offensively, but I think William will get back on track offensively. I think he'll hit. I don't know that he'll be a great hitter. I would love if he can add some power, because that's clearly something the Brewers would benefit from greatly if he can get to some of that power more consistently down the stretch here. But even just being a solid average hitter, which he has not been for over a month now, it's very bad results. And even though he is probably underperforming, it's been really, really bad. Like, the results are awful. If he didn't hit that walk-off homer, it would be even worse at the moment. But yeah, I think that's what I would be doing. I mean, you could probably argue when Pratt's back in, that you just DH Vaughn and play Bowers at first against lefties, because I think Bowers against the lefty is honestly totally fine. I think he can handle that fine, and maybe Sanchez is catching still in that scenario. I'm just saying, like, Contreras is the guy who might be the odd man out, especially in your best lineup at that point. But Gary Sanchez should be playing and playing regularly, and it does. Well, first of all, I think there's no doubt in my mind now that the September call-up on the offensive side is going to be Bo Naylor, because they are going to want to play Gary regularly, and putting him and Contreras at catcher and DH regularly makes it, you're going to want a third catcher as often as you can possibly have one. But two, like, they're going to have to deal with some of that, and it could lead to some weird subbing, and because they're going to want to run for Gary or William in late game situations when they get on base, and that can lead to losing the DH, losing some of that stuff. They're going to have to get creative, but Gary Sanchez has to find a way into the lineup, because right now I'm not expecting him to keep up the 130 WRC plus pace or whatever he's at right now, but he's one of your better hitters at the moment, and he needs to be getting opportunities. And then catching wise, like you said, throwing's the only thing he doesn't have, but I'll take the pitch calling, and everything else is even. So he's got to be out there, especially for Miz, and then especially for lefty starters on the other side. Like that's how I'd be going with it.
And I do want to be clear. I think if you extrapolated it over a larger sample, William Contreras is going to be the better player than Gary Sanchez. But
yes,
we're talking about right now. How are these two guys playing this year? Where are the Brewers at right now? What does the roster look like right now? I think that is the way to go. And again, we've talked about it plenty. The story for William Contreras just continues to be, he is a good player in his current form. The problem is that he should be one of the best hitters in baseball, and for various process-based reasons, he's not one of the best players in baseball, and he's just good instead of elite when he has all of the physical tools to be elite. And instead it's things like weird pitch calling and weird swing decisions and all this kind of stuff that seems to hold him back. And he's not unique. You know, we talked about, like, when Corbin Burns was here, Corbin Burns should have been better than he was after his Cy Young year, but instead he just insisted on throwing cutters nonstop. Freddie Peralta should have been better than he was. He could just never quite get over that hurdle of efficiency and just putting guys away quicker, even though I think he did make every effort to try to get better at that, and maybe that was kind of the problem. William, I think we had a question on it a while back, is more in that Burns territory for me. Of, it just seems like there are some unnecessary shortcomings right now that are related to the way that he is, not effort level to be clear, but the way that he just approaches the game and thinks about the game.
Yeah.
And that's a little frustrating when you see that kind of stuff seeming to hold the guy back.
Yeah. I've said it a number of times. I get a lot more frustrated with the good players who aren't maximizing their potential than I do with guys that just clearly aren't big league players, or guys who are struggling and they're not capable of a ton more. Like, I don't get upset with those guys because it's not their fault they're in the big leagues and getting opportunities for their team. I get more upset, or annoyed with, I should say, maybe, with guys who you can see, like, oh my God, the ceiling is so high here. Like, this is a guy, we've talked about it when we talked about arbitration stuff. Like, the ceiling for William Contreras has been MVP level player. Like, he has that ability in him in terms of the offensive, in terms of, especially when he first came over and the defense had really, really taken off, and he looked like he could be a really good defender in a lot of facets. And instead, it just kind of seems to be regressing every year. And part of that may be catchers just don't have long shelf lives normally. So maybe there will be some of that where he's already hitting a little bit of, like, I'm not saying he should be as bad as the results are right now and everything. I don't think that's the level player he is right now, but we may have already seen peak William Contreras, because that's just kind of how a lot of catcher careers go. That wouldn't shock me. It's a big reason why we always talked about, if an extension was ever going to be talked about, it shouldn't be for William Contreras. It shouldn't be for any catcher in my eyes. They don't age well. They just don't. And we've mentioned Yasmani Grandal in the past. Like, we both wanted them to re-sign Grandal. It's a good thing they didn't. That was a very bad contract. And he was only, I think, a year older than William will be when he hits free agency, when he signed with the White Sox. So, like, it's that type of position. You take a beating, and I think mentally he's taken a beating this year with a lot of stuff, and it's not helping. But that's what frustrates me with players more than anything is when they're capable of being a lot better than they are, and they're just not living up to that potential. I mean, I'll say the same thing about Yelich right now. I actually don't think he's capable of much more right now, which is why I'm not overly frustrated with him. I'm annoyed with the situation. I'm annoyed that he's not good anymore and that he's DHing and he's playing every day. But I don't think the current version of Yelich and what his body can do and how he moves can do that much better than he is right now. And that's why you're not going to hear me like ripping on the guy. It's more the players that I know are capable of more that I'm going to get frustrated with. And William absolutely fits that bill right now. And that's why we're actually probably being nicer to him than a lot of people are at the moment, kind of the opposite of where it's been for the last couple of years in most people's eyes, I think. But that's kind of how I view it. And that's why for guys like him, Burns, Freddie, we've always been pretty hard on all of them because I think you're similar. Like these are guys who have a very high ceiling and they're not reaching that potential versus guys who I can't expect them to do things they can't do. So maybe that's the way to word it.
The minor league sandbox is back now. Jump into it.
Perfect segue. Yeah, let's do it. We'll talk just before we started recording. MLB Pipeline put out their updated top 30s for teams, top 100s. For the first time I can remember in a very, very long time, they had the exact same top 5 as me in the Brewers system. So Jesus Medei, Luis Pena, Josh Adamszewski, Luis Lara, and Brady Ebel. I guess I'm kind of glad I got my Brady Ebel takes off before everyone started shooting him up lists because I really, really like Brady Ebel right now. I think he's got a chance to be kind of a souped up left-handed Cooper Pratt. I'm very, very in on Ebel, but those are their top 5. Those are also the 5 that made the top 100. Medei is the number 1 prospect in baseball. Pena is 21st. Adamszewski is 88th. Lara 89th. He'll be graduating shortly, probably a couple weeks here. And then Brady Ebel is 99th, just sneaking in. So the other quick bit of news is the Brewers are reportedly signing a high school outfielder out of South Korea, Shin Hee-ju. It'll be the very first high schooler that the Brewers have signed out of South Korea. And I think the second amateur, I think they signed a guy out of college in 1979 or 1980. But the information I could find on Shin Hee-ju was he's 18 years old. He's either 5'9" or 5'10". The translation was different for different articles that I tried to Google translate. But he's 5'9" or 5'10". He's 160 pounds. He bats lefty. He throws righty. He was a pitcher as well on his high school team, but he's being signed as an outfielder. But probably a pretty good arm. In 23 games this past season, he went 29 for 83, or these were official games in their official tournaments that they play over there. He had 349. It was an OPS just over 900, 15 RBIs, 27 runs. He stole 15 bases. And then in the Golden Lion tournament, which is a 36-team national high school championship in South Korea, he went 6 for 11 in their 3 games. I posted a little video on Twitter that I was able to find on Instagram, but with the way things translate and the way that in a lot of the Asian cultures, the names kind of flip-flop as like the first, last, and middle name type thing kind of can all be in different orders depending on the country and the way that things are written. It was pretty hard to find information on him. I'm sure there's more out there. I'll probably keep digging as we go and see if I can find more, but I found a couple videos. Definitely a nice lefty swing. I think there might be a little bit of power there given the bat speed that I saw. So it's an interesting one. You just don't like it's the first time the Brewers have done it. So it's an interesting signing and something to keep an eye on when he eventually comes stateside. It sounds like he's going to be ideally in Arizona for the instructional league. So maybe we'll get some video or some reports out of there from some of the prospect people who wind up at Instructs. But moving into the batter portion of things, a couple really hot names to talk about. Braylon Antunez moved up to Wilson, moved up from the ACL to low A when the ACL season ended. Coming into today, he had a 1262 OPS, a 218 WRC plus. That was in his first 59 plate appearances. He had hit 5 home runs. He had also hit 4 doubles. He also homered today while we were recording, I saw. So he's up to 6 home runs, and his OPS has actually gone up from an already staggering 1262. The other part of the equation is that the strikeout rate has only been 23%. It was over 30 in the ACL. He had some whiff concerns. The whiffs are still a little high, but watching him, he looks extremely comfortable. This is a guy who got a ton of really high quality reports out of the DSL, despite being a below average hitter. Started slow in the ACL, still got a ton of quality reports from people who saw him. For a long time, he was kind of a scout over performance type of prospect. Not since he got to low A. This has been absolutely incredible production. He is crushing the baseball. All of the exit velos were at least 104 miles per hour on the first 5 homers. One of them was 108. He hit a homer at 114 in the ACL. He's 18 years old. He's fast. He plays center field. The prospect, like the ceiling here, is about as high as anyone short of Madej and Pena probably. And I saw some people saying maybe this is something where the Brewers viewed him similarly to Alexander Frias, and that's possible. Maybe they thought they were similar level prospects, and that made them more comfortable to trade Frias. I'm not sure, but what I do know is he looks incredibly comfortable for an 18-year-old in low A, and he's crushing the baseball since he got there. So he's one to keep an eye on. I'm sure we're going to see a cold stretch here at some point just because nobody can keep up this production, but incredible start for him at the level. Taden Hall's another one I'm going to highlight this month. He's older. He's 23. He's in high A. I've always loved his swing. He's just never quite produced. But this month, and really the whole season, he's been quite good. But this month, he's got a 1262 OPS in his first 41 plate appearances, 2 homers, 2 triples, a double, 8 walks to only 7 strikeouts. On the season, he has a 90th percentile exit velocity of 107. He's really impacting the ball and hitting the ball hard, and I would love to see him in Double-A at some point. Maybe Blake Burke going up to Triple-A will open up a spot for him a little bit, but we'll see on that front. Either way, under the radar prospect that might be worth knowing as kind of a breakout later in his minor league career. Daniel Dickinson stays hot. I've talked before. I'm still just not super bought in when I watch him. I don't love the actions in the field. I don't love the swing. The homers he's hit have mostly been in like the 99 to 102 mile per hour range, and I just don't think that's sustainable. Either way, though, interesting utility prospect who plays a bunch of positions, has some speed. And yeah, it's a 1040 OPS in August, 2 homers, 8 steals. So like there's definitely some talent there. I hope to be wrong on this one, but it's just not one that ever stands out to me when I watch him. Luis Castillo is another kind of similar to Hall. He had a lot of prospect hype a couple of years ago. Not huge, but like Fangraphs ranked him. Baseball America had him as like a potential breakout. Exit velocities up to over 110 as a teenager. Now he's 22 in high A. Having a really solid season. He had 4 homers so far in August, 979 OPS in that time. He takes a lot of walks. Strikeouts and whiffs are down pretty significantly this year. He's repeating in high A, but still nice to see some progress there. So another guy to maybe keep an eye on is like a later breakout prospect. Luis Pena has been very good of late. In the Beloit series, he had multiple hits at 109 miles per hour, including a triple off the base of the wall. He had 3 triples since the start of August, 973 OPS overall, 7 for 8 on steals. DHing a decent amount since he came off of the hamstring injury, but he's playing some short. He made a really nice play a couple of weeks ago on a slide in the hole, in the 6 hole, and got up and made a really strong throw. So you see the flashes of defense, even if they're not necessarily consistent right now. I still think he's probably an outfielder long term, but maybe he could handle second or third base. Definitely don't think he's a shortstop still. In the DSL, Leanders Matos just continues to hit. He's got a 955 OPS in August, and that's actually bringing his season production down a decent amount because he was well over 1,000 coming into the month. No homers this month, which is kind of the difference for him. He's been hitting a ton of home runs early on in the season, but in the 8 games in August, Hasn't hit a homer, only one double. Slug has kind of dried up a little bit this month, but not a huge concern. Very, very good start for a guy who just turned 17. Ricky Monies also having another solid month here. He had another homer. Brewers PD posted some information about his season the other day. He has the highest 90th percentile exit velocity, the highest barrel rate, and the highest hard hit rate of any DSL player for the Brewers since 2017, which means that includes Churio, that includes Madej, that includes Madej's batted ball stuff was seen as pretty outstanding and outlier stuff, and Monies at least has the batted ball stuff. He doesn't have quite the same level of lack of chase and lack of whiff. Although I have heard that the chase is trending really, really positively lately, so that's good to see too. But huge power from Monies. And then Luke Adams, who just went on the IL, but was having another really solid start to August at 900 OPS with a homer, 2 doubles. Again, 5 walks to only 2 strikeouts. He's also been hit 4 times in the month. The guy is the king of hit by pitches. So eventually, hopefully, we will see him in the big leagues. On the pitching side of things, I'll cover a few of the names I had here. Andrew Healy's an interesting one. I don't think I've talked about much. He just got promoted to high A from Wilson. He was a draft pick last year. He's already 23, so I don't know that there's a ton of ceiling here from the left side, but the Brewers thought there was some untapped potential. They thought they were going to see more velo, I think, than they saw in college, and actually I think it's trended down a tick or two from where it was in college. He was said to be more 93. When I've watched him, it's been more 91, 92. He'll touch like 94, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of velo there. He kind of mixes fastball shapes. He throws a lot of sliders from the left side. This month, it's been solid production in his first couple of outings, one at Wilson and one in Appleton. So he's only given up 2 earned runs in 10 innings, 9 strikeouts to 2 walks. Interesting enough profile, weird arm slot from the left side, but not sure there's a ton there when I watch him. Wandy Torres has continued to be really, really solid of late. His 2 August appearances so far, he's gone 10 innings, 5 in each of them. He struck out 13 to only 1 walk. Ground ball rate is, for the season, almost 60%, and the strikeout rate is almost 30%. So really good combo of swing and miss and ground balls, which is always very interesting, especially from a big lefty. Alexander Mercedes has had a really solid start to his August as well. He's gone 10 innings, only 2 earned runs. DSL pitcher from the left side, up to 95 as a 17-year-old. He's got 11 strikeouts to 3 walks. He's got a big curveball. Baseball America actually posted some video and highlighted him a couple of weeks ago. Interesting name to know. Braylon Owens had another really solid start. Unfortunately, I believe he left with injury in the first inning today for Biloxi, so we'll see what that was. I didn't see the play. I have no idea what it's related to, but he only faced 2 batters and then left the game, so hopefully nothing major there. Wandy Cabrera's a DSL arm who's already 20 years old, but having a really solid season, 2.35 ERA. This month, he's got 10 strikeouts in 6 1/3 innings. He's up to the mid-90s with his fastball, decent breaking ball, decent changeup. Too many walks at the moment, but a guy I imagine we'll see stateside next year and see what happens. The stuff is good enough to at least be worth a look for a while. And the last guy I'll talk about is Josh Noth. Noth, I believe is actually how it's pronounced. Some really good data from Lance Brzdowski, who does fantastic work on his Substack. I don't hold it against him too much that he's a Cubs commentator for their pregame and postgame TV show, but he's very, very good on the pitching side of stuff, and he has a lot of access to data that we don't get public access to. So I'm not going to share all of it because it's his to share, but Josh Noth, more than anything, we got a really good look at kind of what the stuff looks like and also the general amount of swing and miss he's been getting this year. So the whiff rate's over 30%. The zone whiff rate is over 26%, which is very, very high. We know he can spin the ball like crazy. The slider averages almost 3,000 RPMs. He's been up in the ACL this year to 3,500 RPMs on a couple curveballs. right now the curve is probably the pitch that could swing things a little bit for him. It's a really big shape. It's only thrown 81, which given how much he spins the ball and he's a cut profile type of guy. The fastball spin efficiency is actually under 70%, which means he's in like the Sonny Gray cut fastball type of territory with it. But it gets pretty good carry despite that right now. So it's a pitch that gets a lot of swing and miss. It gets more ride than you would expect a pitch that cuts to get. I think it could be a really good pitch, and I think he could also work off of it with some other maybe fastball variations or even just some different secondaries. He could probably throw a sweeper if he wanted to. Either way, high spin. He's averaging about 95 on the fastball in terms of velocity. He's got pretty good extension. He's got a very, very nice looking delivery and a lot of hype for him in terms of like Fangraphs has him just outside their top 100. They basically said Pipeline moved him all the way up to number 10, I believe, in their team rankings. Baseball America bumped him up quite a bit. The results aren't great. It's an ERA of about 4.8 something. But the stuff coming off of Tommy John, a profile that's just a lot different than most people are seeing. I think I was talking to somebody and they kind of said like this might be a harder throwing version of like Coleman Crow in terms of stuff, which also is something that could be pretty interesting. Either way, this is a different profile than the Brewers usually have had, but it's a really interesting one. And there is a very high ceiling here with the level of stuff and the athleticism on the mound. Still very young. Josh Noth he has some helium, and I think it's probably safe to ignore some of the surface level stats for him at the moment because he's working off of Tommy John. The stuff is so good. He's actually been in the zone quite a bit. Actually, he's in like the 80th percentile for zone rate in high A. So I think this is one to keep a really close eye on, and somebody that honestly, I've always said that Bishop Letson has the highest ceiling of all the pitching prospects, but I think Noth has given him a run for his money. I think you could probably argue he has the highest one at this point in the system. So that's all I got. Missed the whole week. Probably went a little longer, but hopefully some good information.
So Josh Noth is going to throw a sinker when he gets to the big leagues, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's actually a spot for it on the plot, so I'm not saying it in a condescending, disagreeing way. You know, like when Shane Drowan or Kyle Harrison are working on sinkers, I'm going to raise an eyebrow. But cutty guy like this, like he could use one.
Yes, 100% could.
We'll see. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Brewer Fanatic Podcast. Brewers have another gauntlet of a series coming up here. They're taking on the Dodgers in LA to cap off this long stretch of games with multiple trips. We'll see what we have to recap next week. I think that's the best way to put it. Until then, thank you all for tuning in.